The Galactic Council's central chamber was never silent. It was a place of endless voices of countless languages layered together, where hundreds of worlds tried to make their interests heard. But on that day, silence filled the Great Hall. Every delegate, every ambassador, every soldier and scribe stared at the single screen floating above the assembly. The image was plain, almost disappointing compared to the brilliant holograms the galaxy was used to. A human man stood there, dressed not in armor or ceremonial robes, but in a simple black uniform with no insignia. His face carried no anger, no visible threat. Instead, it was calm, almost too calm. "This is Earth's final message to the galaxy," the man said. His voice carried evenly, translated into 100 tongues at once. "You made this choice. Now face the consequences." The words echoed across the chamber like a falling stone into deep water. No one spoke. For a moment, no one even breathed. The man on the screen continued. "For centuries, humanity has given everything to hold this galaxy together. We have fought wars that were not ours. We have mended treaties that were not written for us. We have carried burdens that no one else wished to carry. And when others abandoned hope, we remained." His eyes lifted slightly, scanning as though he could see each alien face staring back at him. "We believed in a galaxy greater than itself. We believed unity was possible. We believed peace could be built, brick by brick, through struggle and sacrifice. But belief cannot survive betrayal forever." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Delegates leaned to one another, whispering in nervous tones. The humans had been difficult allies, yes, stubborn, restless, unwilling to be ruled. Yet they were also the glue that kept fragile coalitions from breaking apart. And now, this. The man's voice grew firmer. "When Earth called for aid, you turned away. When our worlds burned, you looked to your borders and said it was not your war. When we begged for unity, you answered with silence. You forced us to stand alone, and still we stood, but no longer." His image flickered as though the signal came not from human technology but something older, heavier. The silence in the chamber deepened. The representatives of entire star empires leaned forward, waiting for words they did not want to hear. "Today humanity withdraws," the man declared. "We will no longer fight your wars. We will no longer hold your treaties. We will no longer bleed to keep your empires alive. This is not abandonment. It is consequence. You made this choice. Now you must live with it." For a brief moment, the calm face softened, not in pity, but in something deeper, disappointment. "We do not leave you empty-handed. You still have the tools we shared, the knowledge we gave, the lessons we taught. Use them wisely if you can. Or waste them as so many times before. The galaxy will decide for itself, but Earth will not return to save you again." The screen went dark. The chamber erupted. Voices clashed like storms colliding. Protests, denials, angry threats. Some called it a bluff. Others shouted that humans were arrogant, that they could never walk away from the galaxy they had sacrificed so much to shape. But beneath the noise, a quiet dread grew. Because everyone in that room remembered. They remembered the time when the Veyari fleets poured across 3 sectors, and it was human ships that arrived first, long before the Council mobilized. They remembered the famine on Chorus Prime, when human convoys brought food and water across deadly routes no other pilots dared to fly. They remembered the endless negotiations where human diplomats, strange and stubborn, refused to leave the table until even bitter enemies signed their names. And they remembered, too, how easy it had been to take that for granted. For the first time in centuries, the chamber felt small. The stars themselves seemed more distant, as though the universe had just shifted on its axis. The humans were gone, not destroyed, not defeated, but gone by their own choice. Far away, on the edge of the Sol system, the last transmission faded into silence. No signals came from Earth. No ships left its orbit. The great planet of humanity, always restless, always reaching outward, had gone still. In that stillness, the galaxy felt something it had not felt in a long time. It felt fear, the silence from Earth did not last long before it became a storm across the galaxy. Within days, the Great Council Hall was filled with messages, demands, and heated arguments. Every empire wanted to know the same thing. Was the human threat real? Had they truly withdrawn? For centuries, humanity had been strange partners to the stars. They were not the strongest, not the most advanced, and not the most numerous. Yet somehow they always made themselves impossible to ignore. Their inventions spread through every fleet. Their strategies shaped every battle. Their ideals found their way into every treaty. Now, with their sudden disappearance, every empire was forced to see just how much of their order had quietly depended on human hands. The Cavor Dominion was the first to speak openly. Their ambassador stood before the council, his scaled head raised high. "The humans are deceivers," he declared. "This is a ploy to gain power. They want us to panic so they can return as rulers. We must not bend to their game." But others disagreed. The Arellan Collective, known for their cold logic, countered quickly. No, humanity has no need for tricks. Their message was clear. They have abandoned this council. The question is not whether they will return. It is whether we can stand without them. The chamber erupted again, louder than before. In the months that followed, the cracks widened. Treaties that had been held together by human negotiators began to unravel. On the border between the Sarathi and the Veyari, small skirmishes broke out. Without human patrol ships to keep peace, the old hatred between those two species reignited like dry grass touched by flame. Merchants felt the loss as well. Human freighters had once been the lifeline of trade, crossing dangerous routes no one else dared to fly. They called it the human corridor, a network of passages through unstable space that only Earthborn navigators seemed able to master. Now those routes were empty. Goods grew scarce. Prices rose. Worlds that had once thrived began to feel hunger. Everywhere, the same question spread. Had humanity been the true foundation of the galaxy all along? On the distant world of Chorus Prime, an elderly governor sat with her advisors. She remembered years ago when famine struck her people. It was human ships, not council fleets, that had arrived first. "We thought them reckless," she whispered. "We thought they risked too much, but they saved us. Without them, who will answer when the next disaster comes?" The advisors had no answer. Meanwhile, in the far reaches of the Orion Arm, a young captain of the Teari fleet stared at his failing engines. The core technology of his ship had once been perfected by human engineers. Without their guidance, maintenance became harder each year. Already, half of his squadron was grounded. "We laughed at them," he admitted softly to his crew. "We called them fragile, but it was their knowledge that made us strong." Back at the council, the arguments turned bitter. Some demanded that humanity be forced back, even if by threat of war. Others warned that such a war could never be won. Still others whispered that perhaps Earth's people had not abandoned the galaxy at all. Perhaps they had found something greater, something beyond the council's reach, and chosen to leave the rest behind. Fear grew with every whisper. It was not fear of human weapons. The galaxy had stronger armies, larger fleets, and older empires. No, it was fear of what their absence revealed. Without humanity's constant push, the stars suddenly seemed smaller. Without their vision, the future seemed dim. Months passed. Old enemies sharpened their blades again. Neighbors eyed one another with suspicion. The council, once proud of its unity, now trembled on the edge of collapse. One evening, in the quiet halls of the abandoned human embassy, a lone archivist walked among the dust. He was not human, but he had studied their ways for many years. He looked at the empty chairs, the silent chambers, and whispered words no one else could hear. They were the bridge, and we burned it. Across the galaxy, more voices began to admit the same. Humanity, stubborn and strange, had not been perfect. They had quarreled, they had argued, they had demanded too much at times, but they had also been the ones who refused to let the galaxy fall apart. They had been the balance, the mediator, the restless force that would not allow despair to win. Now without them, despair began to rise. World by world, system by system, the fractures grew wider. And though no one wished to say it aloud, everyone felt the same truth stirring like a shadow at the edge of the stars. The galaxy needed humanity. But humanity was gone. Months after the broadcast, expeditions began to move toward Sol, the cradle of humanity. At first, only a few dared to go, scouts from smaller empires, adventurers chasing rumors, and desperate merchants who still hoped to reopen trade with Earth. Later, even the proud fleets of great powers joined the search. Curiosity, fear, and necessity drove them all. The closer they came to Earth, the stranger it became. Ships reported that human navigation buoys, tiny machines that once marked safe paths, were gone. Long-distance beacons were missing as though carefully dismantled. It was not destruction. It was erasure. It felt as if humanity had quietly gathered every trace of its presence and taken it home. When at last the fleets reached Sol, they expected a wall of defenses, perhaps human warships waiting to strike. Instead, they found stillness. Earth's orbit was quiet. The great shipyards above Mars were empty. The lunar colonies showed no life. Even the famous rings of satellites that once wrapped the planet were gone, and then they saw Earth itself. Blue oceans still rolled across its surface. Green forests stretched wide, and white clouds curled in the atmosphere. The world looked alive, untouched, and yet there were no signs of people. Cities stood tall, but the streets were empty. Lights did not shine at night. It was as though the entire species had simply stood up one day and walked away. Admiral Taylor of the Irellan fleet stepped onto the surface himself. He found a city full of human structures, bridges, towers, gardens, and machines. All perfectly intact, none broken, none destroyed, but silent. A playground still held its swings. A library still held its books. And yet not a single human being could be found. "It is not war," the admiral whispered to his officers. "It is choice." Across the galaxy, the mystery deepened. Even stranger, human technology outside Sol began to fail. On worlds far from Earth, human-built engines slowed. Human-designed weapons went dark. Computers, once brilliant with human algorithms, grew sluggish and unresponsive. It was as if every system that carried the mark of human hands had received the same hidden command. Stop. Panic spread quickly. Merchant fleets grounded. Colonies that depended on human power plants scrambled for survival. Armies that had relied on human tactics found themselves unprepared for sudden weakness. The galaxy had always thought of humans as restless wanderers, eager to leave their home and spread into the stars. But now they realized something else. Humans had also woven themselves into the fabric of galactic life. Quietly, over centuries, they had become the invisible thread that held everything together. And now that thread had been pulled away. Still, echoes of humanity remained. In the border wars, commanders discovered that many of their best strategies had been borrowed from old human generals. Without new ideas from Earth, battles became clumsy, predictable, and costly. On trade routes, pilots tried to replace the human corridor, but none could match the strange instinct humans had for navigating dangerous paths. Dozens of ships were lost in regions humans once crossed with ease. In diplomacy, meetings dragged endlessly. Human negotiators had once been known for their ability to break deadlock with creativity, humor, or sheer persistence. Without them, treaties collapsed under the weight of old grudges. It became clear that humanity had left behind something stronger than weapons. They had left behind a way of thinking. On the world of Solora, a young scholar studied old recordings of human debates. She noticed how humans always searched for compromise even when they were stubborn. They looked for hidden angles, unexpected solutions. Inspired, she brought those lessons to her own people. And for the first time in decades, Solora ended its civil war. On another planet, a child of the Kavor Dominion found an ancient human song stored in a data crystal. The melody spread through his community, softening old bitterness. "This is what they gave us," his teacher said quietly. "Even in their absence, they speak." But whispers grew darker too. Some believed humanity had not truly disappeared. They said humans had moved beyond the galaxy, to another plane of existence. Others feared humanity was watching, waiting for the galaxy to collapse, so they could return as judges. In hidden corners of space, small groups began to call themselves echo tribes. They wore human symbols, studied human culture, and swore to keep the memory alive. Some did this out of respect, others out of fear. The Galactic Council tried to control the chaos, but its meetings turned hollow. Delegates argued endlessly. Should they beg humanity to return? Should they prepare for war against them? Or should they learn to survive without them? The answer never came. What did come was silence, deep and heavy. Earth remained quiet. Human systems remained dark. But the absence was never empty. Everywhere the galaxy could feel the echo of humanity, pressing against them like a voice in the back of the mind. It was a reminder. The humans had said, "You made this choice, now face the consequences." And the galaxy was only beginning to understand what those words truly meant. At first, the galaxy believed it could adapt. They thought that without humans things would grow difficult but not impossible. Empires had survived before humanity, and surely they could survive again. That confidence lasted only a few short years. The first cracks came at the borders. The Sarathi and the Vayari, long enemies, wasted no time. Their fleets met in the empty corridors of space, each side claiming abandoned trade routes once kept safe by human patrols. Without Earth's mediators to pull them apart, the old war flared again. Skirmishes turned into full battles, and soon entire systems burned in conflict. The Council tried to intervene, but their efforts collapsed into shouting matches. In the past, human diplomats had always pushed through the noise, offering creative compromises, speaking with a strange mix of patience and passion that other species could not imitate. Now treaties broke before the ink was dry. Trade collapsed next. Human merchants had been the bridge between worlds, linking empires with daring routes through unstable space. Without them, cargo ships were forced to take longer paths or risk dangerous regions without human navigators to guide them. Food shortages appeared on outer colonies. Medicine grew scarce. Black markets rose, feeding on desperation. On Chorus Prime, a world that once thrived under human aid, the governor stood before her starving citizens. "We depended on them too much," she admitted with sorrow, "and now we pay the price." The greatest shock came from technology. Human systems had been woven into almost every starship and colony. Their engines, their codes, their designs. Quietly, over centuries, humanity had shared knowledge that improved life for all. But now those systems faltered. Ships failed in the middle of travel, factories powered down, energy grids weakened. It was as though the galaxy itself was dimming. Some believed it was sabotage, a secret trap planted by Earth. Others argued it was simply the natural result of losing the people who best understood how to keep such machines alive. Whatever the truth, the effect was the same. Chaos spread. On the council floor, fear grew heavier with every meeting. Delegates no longer asked why humanity had left. Instead, they asked how long the galaxy could last without them. "Look around you," said the Ireland representative, her voice cold but trembling. "Wars on 3 borders, trade cut in half, entire fleets grounded. Humanity was the thread, and without them we are unraveling." But the Kavor Dominion refused to admit weakness. Their ambassador slammed his clawed hand on the table. "We are stronger without them. They tied us down with their ideals. Let them vanish. We will build new strength." Yet even as he spoke, reports arrived that Kavor's own ships had suffered failures. Their greatest weapons, built with human enhancements, had gone silent. Pride could not hide the truth any longer. Across the stars, ordinary people felt the change most of all. Farmers on distant moons who once used human-designed machines now returned to older, slow, tools. Miners who had relied on human drills found their work harder and more dangerous. Families who once sang human songs at gatherings now did so with tears, knowing those voices would never return. Still, hope flickered in small places. On the planet Silora, the young scholar who had studied human debates continued her work. She gathered leaders from rival cities, guiding them with lessons drawn from Earth's example. "If they could bring peace to so many enemies," she said, "then we can try to do the same." Against all odds, her world avoided collapse, proving that humanity's legacy could still inspire. But such sparks were rare. For most, the darkness grew deeper. Rumors spread quickly through the trade routes. Some whispered that humanity had not abandoned the galaxy at all, but was waiting in the shadows, watching. Others claimed the humans had ascended to a higher plane, leaving the rest of the galaxy behind like children unready to follow. Fear of their possible return mixed with longing for their presence, creating a strange tension across every world. In the quiet of the abandoned human embassy, The archivist returned once more. He walked among the empty halls where dust lay thick on forgotten tables. He touched the walls gently and whispered, "You said we made this choice. And now, we see it." His words carried the truth that few wished to speak aloud. It was not humanity that had abandoned the galaxy. It was the galaxy that had abandoned humanity, long ago, when Earth cried for aid and none came. Now the debt had come due. Every empire felt the weight of that debt. Wars, famine, and silence filled the stars. Yet through it all the echo of humanity remained, an echo that reminded them what had been lost and what might never be regained. And in that echo, one question grew louder than all others. Would humanity ever return? Centuries passed, but the silence of Earth never broke. The stars turned, empires rose and fell, and still the humans did not return. At first, the galaxy lived in fear. Every shadow seemed like the whisper of human ships waiting to strike. Every unexplained failure was blamed on Earth's hidden hand. Yet as time moved on, fear softened into something else. Memory. The galaxy began to remember. On Salora, the scholar's teachings spread from city to city, and soon her world became known as a place of peace. Leaders from other planets came to study her methods, many of which were rooted in ancient human texts. They are gone, she told her students, but their way of thinking remains. We must not let it fade. In the Kavor Dominion, once proud and unyielding, young engineers studied broken human machines. Slowly, they learned not only how to repair them, but how to innovate for themselves. In time, they built new engines, less powerful than the old ones, but their own. Even the most stubborn of the Dominion whispered a truth their ancestors had denied. Humanity had given them a foundation, and without that gift they would have fallen long ago. Across the galaxy, fragments of human culture lived on. Songs once sung on Earth were now sung in alien marketplaces. Stories that humans had carried to the stars were retold in countless tongues. And though the words changed, the heart of those stories did not. Courage, unity, and the refusal to surrender. In the Grand Council, the empty human seats were never filled. They remained untouched, preserved as a reminder. New generations of ambassadors would stand in that hall and look at the silent chairs. Many wondered aloud what the humans would say if they could see the galaxy now. Some said they would be proud. Others feared they would only be disappointed. But wherever the truth lay, no one could deny the change. The galaxy had once leaned on humanity too heavily. It had expected them to be the peacemakers, the builders, the risk-takers, while others stood aside. In their absence, the stars learned a painful lesson. Unity could not be carried by one species alone. If peace was to last, every world would need to share the burden. And slowly, painfully, they began to try. On the borders where wars once raged, councils of mixed species replaced human negotiators. Progress was slow, arguments fierce, but bit by bit, truces began to hold. On the trade routes, alien navigators dared the dangerous paths once guided by human instinct. They lost many ships, but through persistence they mapped new passages. The human corridor was reborn, not by humans but by those who had learned from their bravery. Even in technology, collaboration replaced rivalry. Engineers from rival empires worked together to rebuild failing systems. They shared ideas in a way they had never done before, inspired by the memory of a people who once believed knowledge should be given, not hoarded. Still, the mystery of humanity never faded. Some claimed they had seen faint signals from beyond the galactic rim. Others spoke of dreams where human voices whispered warnings or encouragement. No proof was ever found, but the legends grew. Children on distant worlds looked to the stars and asked their parents when the humans would return. The parents could only answer, perhaps one day. In truth, no one knew if Earth's people had left for another galaxy, or if they had simply chosen to step away forever. But their absence became more than a wound, it became a guide. One day in the council hall, an archivist rose to speak. He was old, his voice weak, but his words carried weight. He had spent his life studying humanity, walking through their empty embassy, collecting their stories. Long ago, he said, the humans gave us their final message. You made this choice, now face the consequences. We have faced those consequences. We have suffered. But we have also learned, and perhaps that was their purpose all along. Perhaps they left so that we could grow. The chamber fell silent. Even the proudest ambassadors did not argue. In that moment, they all felt the same truth. Humanity's legacy was not in their weapons, nor their machines, nor their numbers. It was in the change they had sparked in others. And so the galaxy moved forward. Worlds still quarreled. Empires still rose and fell. But now, when war threatened, leaders would remember the empty seats in the council hall. When fear whispered, they would remember the stubborn courage of a fragile species who refused to give up. And when despair grew heavy, they would remember the human's simple gift, the belief that a better future could be built even if the cost was high. Generations passed. The echoes of humanity never faded. They were heard in songs, in stories, in laws, in ideas. Humanity was absent, yet everywhere, and somewhere beyond the reach of known stars, perhaps humanity watched. Perhaps they waited, or perhaps they had moved on to dreams even greater than the galaxy itself. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The galaxy would never forget Earth's final words, the message that had reshaped their destiny. You made this choice, now face the consequences.